Not a fan of the bright pink and red decor for Valentine's Day? Then stick around. I have some neutral DIYs that I think you are really going to love. For this project, you will need to grab one of these heart forms at the Dollar Tree, and these, of course, have a lot of this tinsel on them. They had several different colors of this, but of course, I wanted to unwrap this and change this up just a little bit. I wanted some Valentine DIYs that would incorporate nicely with my winter decor that I still have up. So I wanted to do a lot of cream, beige, white colors, even some greenery that goes along with my winter greenery that I still have out. So to start this project, I just unwrapped all of that tinsel from my heart form. And I have some of this nautical rope in my stash. I had one full bundle and then half of another one, and I didn't completely wrap my heart form with this rope. If you want to use just all rope to wrap your heart with, you will probably need about 4 bundles of that, and you can find that at Dollar Tree as well. And I did take some just of my wire cutters and I just cut off all of those prongs on the inside of the heart, and I did the outside as well. It just made it a little bit easier to get this shape wrapped once I had all of these pieces cut off. And I just started on the bottom portion of my heart form, just added a little bit of hot glue and started wrapping my rope. I tried to keep this as tight as possible while I was wrapping that so I wouldn't have any gaps in that rope. And I added just a little bit more hot glue on the front as well. And I just pulled that rope through, and then I do add some hot glue to the previous piece of rope that I have wrapped around that form. That just helped hold everything in place, and I got a nice clean finish, and I like the look that I got from this. I didn't have any gaps, and I wasn't able to see any of that form. So I just continued that process until I ran out of this cream colored nautical rope, and you can see in the corner there I had kind of a dark brown. I had thought about using that as well just to complete this form, but I decided not to do that. So here's what it looks like. I was not able, of course, to get all of that form wrapped. And I had one of these scarves left over in my stash. They still have some of these, or at least they did the last time I was at Dollar Tree here, and that was about the middle of January. And I just cut this down into 3 different strips. I wanted to be sure that I would have enough of this scarf to completely finish wrapping my heart shape. So I cut that down into smaller pieces, which allowed me to be able to do that. Thank you for watching my video today. I hope you guys are enjoying these projects so far. If you are, please be sure that you give this video a thumbs up and also click that hype button. If you are new here, welcome to my small little corner of YouTube. I am Alicia, and I am so happy that you are here today. Now let's get back to our projects. And again, I just used some hot glue to start adding these fabric pieces to my heart form. I kind of started where I had ended with my cording, just so I wouldn't have any gaps. And I did want to kind of twist up and bunch this scarf. I just thought that look would be a little bit better, kind of soften the edges, and that does allow me to kind of move things around and just manipulate that scarf a little bit and kind of hide any pieces of that heart form that you might see through that scarf. So I just twisted that and wrapped my scarf until I had the rest of my heart form completely covered. And I'm just loving all of these soft vibes that I get, just cozy vibes from this scarf. I just really like the effect that I get from these 2 different textures on this heart form. Of course, like I mentioned, you could just use that cording if you wanted to, but I really like the finished look that I get from using the cording as well as the scarf. I think it just makes this project look very soft and romantic, and it goes really nicely with all of the decor that I still have on my mantle for wintertime. I like being able to just add a few pieces here and there to what my main decor is, and that just gives a nod to Valentine's holiday without being overpowering with those bright pink and red colors. And just to finish off this scarf, I did just add a little bit of extra hot glue on the back of that, just trimmed off any of that excess fabric. And you will just continue to do that with each piece of your scarf until you have your form completely covered. And on the front, on this last piece of scarf, I did add just a little bit of hot glue and kind of laid that over that first piece of my cording on the bottom of my heart. Added a little bit more hot glue on the back, and again, trimmed up any of that excess fabric. And I mentioned because I twisted this scarf fabric that you can kind of just move that around if you need to. So once I had everything glued down, I just went back in, just played around with the placement of that fabric on there, added any hot glue that I needed to, just to make sure everything was going to stay in place. And I have had a couple of these packs of felt flower kits in my stash probably for a year now. I just haven't had the opportunity to use them yet, so I pulled them out for this project. And of course, I want to keep everything neutral, so I did use just a couple of different things from both of these packs. And if you don't have these felt flower kits, you could make your own if you wanted to. You can get sheets of felt at Hobby Lobby that are pretty inexpensive, and sometimes you can find those at Dollar Tree as well. But I just pulled out the leaves from this one and the white flowers from this pack. I do try to use one of those silver flowers, but I ought not to do that in the end. But these are really easy to put together. They're already cut out, so you just pull them off of the form. Just remove all of that excess felt that you have. There's instructions on the back of these that show you how that you can form these flowers, but this is just a really easy embellishment that you can add to a project like this. So you just, once you have all of that excess felt removed, you just roll up that felt piece, and that just creates different types of flowers. Use hot glue when you need to, just to make sure that everything is staying together. And you will just continue that process with however many flowers that you want to make for your project. And I did use my scissors just to trim off any of that excess felt that you might have. And I also had some other things in my stash that I just played around with to see what would look the best for this. I had some of those wood roses, some cotton pods, and some burlap leaves. So I just pulled those out to see what I wanted to add to this. And I also had some of these greenery stems. I picked these up from Hobby Lobby, and I just pulled out a few of those that I thought would coordinate with the felt leaves that I already had pulled out for this project. So once I had everything gathered that I wanted to add to this, I just started laying everything on top, and I did only put my embellishments on that cording. I just wanted it in that one area off to the left side of my heart. So I just put everything that I had made or pulled out, just played around with that and moved things around until I was happy with the way that this looks. And you guys can see that I just went with the whites, the creams, and I did use a couple of those peach flowers. I thought those would be just a very small pop of color for this project. I am trying to keep everything as neutral as possible. And once I had everything kind of figured out where I wanted that to go, I did just glue everything down with some hot glue, and I did just trim off the ends of those longer greenery pieces that came in that pack from Hobby Lobby. If I needed to, it just worked a little bit better just to trim off those longer ends and be able to tuck those in under my flowers. Just added a couple of those burlap leaves here and there. And just play around with this, you guys, until you are happy with the way that it looks. This is your project. You do what makes you happy and puts a smile on your face. And once I have everything glued down, this project is finished. I love the way this one turned out. I love using both of those different types of material. Just gives this another unique look, I think. And I really like these felt flowers along with those wood roses. I opted not to use any of the cotton pods just because they didn't really fit in there as well. But let me know what you guys think about this neutral Valentine DIY. I have had this wooden heart decor piece in my stash probably for a couple of years now. I picked this up at Dollar Tree, and I just pick things up when I see it. I maybe not have a particular idea in mind at that moment, but I like to have just different things in my stash that I can use as blanks and completely give them a makeover. And of course, I wanted to cover up that front side of this sign, and that center part is kind of some kind of fuzzy fabric. So you might be able to remove that if you wanted to and just work on that side. I just opted to use some scrap packing paper that I had on hand just to cover that up, and I will be using the back side as the front side on this project. So I just traced out my heart shape and just cut that out, and then I just used a Elmer's glue stick to apply that, and I also used just a little bit of my Aleene's tacky glue on that fuzzy fabric in the center because I knew I wouldn't be able to get that Elmer's glue stick applied to that fabric. And then I just placed my piece of paper on that, just made sure that I had everything lined up and just pressed that firmly just to make sure all of that paper would adhere to the two different types of glue that I have on my heart. And I have several calendars in my stash. I pick these up when I see them. A lot of times I'm not able to find the most popular prints or patterns, but this one I really liked and I love this design. It says, "Do all things with great love." So I wanted to use that for this project. And of course, it is neutral and will match all of my other decor that I'm working on in this video. So I just lined that up with my heart shape, and I tried to make sure that none of my letters would be cut off once I glued this down and trimmed that up. And I did just take a pencil and mark some lines at the very top of this, just so I would know where I'm going to be gluing down that calendar page. And I do go in with some plaster colored chalk paint from Waverly, and I just paint that small area on the top that will not be covered with that calendar page. And I did a couple of coats of my paint just to get the coverage that I wanted, and I wouldn't be able to see that press board. And again, I'm just using my Elmer's glue stick just to attach my calendar page. These work really well for me, and I like to pick those up when all of the back to school stuff is on sale. And I have several of those in my stash, and they last me probably about a year. So if you guys want glue sticks, remember that tip and just look for them when everything, all the back to school supplies are out at Walmart and places like that. So I just pressed my calendar page down firmly, made sure I didn't have any bubbles or wrinkles in that, and just trimmed off that excess with a pair of scissors. And then I just go in a downward motion with a jumbo fingernail file and just file off any of that excess paper. And I wanted to add some lines at the very top of my heart just so it would match those lines in that calendar page. So I just took a ruler and a pencil and made a really dark line, and then I just go back in with a paper towel and my finger and kind of just rub that and smudge that. And that also gives me a little bit of the gray color. I don't know if you guys can see that very well on camera, but there's a little bit of gray in that calendar page. And when I smudged that with the towel and my finger, it just kind of blended in that top piece a little bit better. So I wanted to kind of make this a pocket on the bottom. So I just pulled out some of my fiberfill stuffing, just pulled that into smaller pieces and added that just on the bottom portion of my heart sign. And of course, I just used some hot glue to do that. Just kind of held that in place until everything stayed where I wanted it to. And I have some more of that scarf fabric. You guys, these work really great for any kind of fabric project. And I like to treat them as like just a fabric piece and not a scarf. So I just measured out the piece that I would need to cover up that bottom portion of my heart, trimmed that down, and started attaching that with some hot glue. I tried to pull this tightly so I wouldn't have any loose pieces on the front of my piece, and I just continued to go all the way around my heart shape, adding hot glue where I needed it, trimmed off any of that excess fabric, just kind of folded up that bottom piece until I had everything covered. And if I had to do this project over again, the one thing that I would change, I wouldn't make this fabric piece go up the heart quite as much. I would shorten that just a little bit. I hope that makes sense. I would pull that down a little bit so you could see a little bit more of that greenery um, on the calendar page, and then I wouldn't have such a hard time adding my greenery to this. I was kind of covering up my words when I added that. You'll see here in just a second. But I had several different greenery picks that I wanted to use for this. I wanted this to be a 3D sign. And I just trimmed those down into smaller pieces that were easier to work with. And I think all of these, no, not all of them. Some of these came in a pack from Amazon, and then some of these came from Walmart. So you guys just use whatever that you might have already on hand and whatever that you might have in your stash. So I just started putting all of these little pieces in, just tucking them into that polyfill, and I didn't actually glue any of these down. It was easy to put them in there, and they had a really good hold in that stuffing. And since I didn't use hot glue, I can change this out if I want to and add some kind of different florals, maybe some cream or beige colored flowers later on in the spring if I want to. You could totally leave this out after Valentine's Day. So I just played around with the pieces of greenery that I had, kind of folded down the top of my fabric piece just so I would be able to push those down a little bit further so I wouldn't cover up my words at the top. And I wanted to add just another little embellishment to this, just something on the front of that pocket. So I have some of these heart-shaped ornaments, and these come in a pack from Dollar Tree. I think I got these last year, but I'm sure they have either these or something similar this year. And I just wrote out a Bible verse in pencil first, just to make sure I had all of my spacing correct. And then I took one of my acrylic paint pens and just wrote over that. You could use stickers if you had that. You could use stamps. You could cut something out in vinyl if you have a cutting machine, whatever that you want to do. And I also had some of these little stamps and an ink pad, and I just added a heart to this just as an added touch of decoration to this little embellishment. And I took just some hot glue and glued that onto the fabric pocket on my heart sign. And I have some of these little brass tacks in my stash. I think I got these at Hobby Lobby, and I just used a little bit of hot glue and stuck that in the hole where this was an ornament just to cover that up. And then I just used some hot glue to reattach the hanger on the back. And that is it for this project. I love just how simple this one was. I didn't have a lot of materials for this project, but I think this one turned out absolutely beautiful. Let me know what you guys think about this idea. This next idea isn't really a decor piece, although I did make this over to match the decor that I have in my bedroom. So once you guys see the finished product, I would love to know your thoughts on this idea. I found this little cardboard gift box at the Dollar General when all of their Christmas stuff was 90% off. So I think I paid about 60 cents for this one, and it is the perfect container for this idea that I want to share with you guys. So I did just remove that bow and any of that excess hot glue that was on the little flap of this box, and I just removed that price sticker on the bottom as well, just to have a blank canvas to start working on this one. I wanted this one to look kind of rustic and maybe have a wood look to it. I started to use popsicle sticks, but I decided that would take way too long, and I did not have the time to do that for this project. So I opted to use this piece of cardboard paper that I had in my stash. I picked this up from Hobby Lobby, and it is the I don't know exactly the correct term for this, but it has the ridges on that one side. So I thought I could get kind of a faux wood finish with that. So I just measured out the size that I would need to cover both ends, the front, the back, and the bottom of my box. And I just cut out all of my pieces, and I started applying those with some hot glue. And you guys, I mentioned you could use popsicle sticks. I think that would look really good and stain those. Or you could use cardstock, faux leather. There are a lot of different options to redo boxes like this. So just whatever that you have on hand, just get creative and use whatever you might have in your craft stash. So once I had all of those pieces cut out, I just glued everything down with some hot glue, just trimmed off any of that excess that maybe I didn't get cut off initially, and I just covered all of my box that way. And for the top flap, I had some of this faux leather in my stash, and this one came from Dollar Tree. So I just opened that box and laid down that top flap on that vinyl piece, just traced that out and cut that to fit the top. And I love keeping this faux vinyl, or not vinyl, faux leather in my stash because you can use it for so many different projects. It is very versatile and easy to work with. So if you see it at your Dollar Tree, I would encourage you to pick up several of those. They have a lot of different colors that you can choose from too. And Elmer's glue, the glue stick, is my glue of choice for the rest of this project. I just put down a very liberal amount on the top of that and carefully lined up my leather piece and made sure to press that firmly. And I did sit this upside down and put a weight on that and let that glue set up before I moved on to the next step in this project. And I mentioned I wanted this to look more like a wooden box, so I just took some of my antique wax from Waverly and a small little chip brush and just did kind of a dry brushing all over the surface of that cardboard paper that I had put down. And I think this does give me more of a wood look to that. And I also had one of these little unfinished wooden hearts in my stash, and I just stained that with that antique wax as well. And I am slowly working my way through this cardstock pack. I picked this up at Hobby Lobby several years ago. So I just flipped through and found one that kind of looked like Valentine's, but was also within that neutral theme that I am trying to go for with all of these projects. And you can see there that the inside of this box just had snowflakes and things like that. I wanted to cover that up because I don't want this to look like a wintertime box, obviously. So I just traced out the portion that I would need for the lid first, and I cut that out. And you could paint this as well if you don't want to take the time to cut out paper or vinyl or anything like that to cover this up. And again, I just used my glue stick and added that cardstock to the inside portion of this flap. And it does have kind of like that little groove there. I don't know if you guys can see that on camera or not. So I took the tip of a paintbrush and just pressed that groove in because I wanted to make sure that I would still be able to close my box once that glue had dried. And I just repeated all of those steps with each side of my box, the inside portion. I did the bottom as well, except I didn't glue down that bottom part. It fit really nicely in there, and I knew it wouldn't be coming out or anything like that. So I just did the sides and the front and the back with some glue, and I did have to go back in and just trim down my pieces just to make sure I had a good fit. And this box would be great to use as storage for any small items that you might have on hand, any mementos, things like that. It would be cute to put in a girl's room just as an extra storage piece. There's lots of different ways that you could use this. So this project is very functional. And once I placed my cardstock pieces on the inside of my box, I did use my little silicone spatula just to make sure I had everything pressed down firmly, and that helped me get in the corners and just make sure I had a good bond with my paper and my box. So there's how it looks with everything completely lined. I didn't worry about those top edges. You can still kind of see a little bit of that original design, but this is going to be closed for the most part, so I didn't worry about covering that up. And this did have some little Velcro fasteners on the box originally, so I had just set those aside, and I just used some hot glue and reattached those to the flap as well as that front portion of the box, so I would be able to snap this closed. And make sure if you reattach those, you just line them up, otherwise you won't have a good closure on that. And I just glued my little stained wooden heart on the front of that flap just to give this a little bit of embellishment. And I created some of these acts of service cards, and you guys be sure that you check out the description box because I will leave a link for these, and you can get that free printable if you just click that link. And these are a lot of different ideas that you can do. You can specify these for your spouse, your kids, whoever that you want to. I went ahead and made up 2 sheets of these, and I also left one blank so you guys can add anything that you would want to that fits well with your schedule and your budget. I just love the idea of having these acts of service cards readily available, and I can just pull these out whenever I want to do something nice for my husband. I'm trying to be very intentional about doing things for him, not just around Valentine's Day, but throughout the year. So I hope this gives you some ideas and that you will start incorporating into your daily routine or weekly or monthly, whatever works best for your schedule. I love to keep an assortment of different things in my wood stash, and I like to just look through there and try to get an idea of something that I want to create and just put things together to make a beautiful home decor piece. And that's exactly what I did for this project. I just pulled out a finial, a wooden round, a wooden candle holder, a dowel rod, and I had that, I don't even know what that is made out of, that heart over there that you see on the left hand side. I found that at Dollar Tree. So I just pulled out all those things, and I wanted to put these all together and just make a really fun Valentine's piece. So I painted all of my wooden elements with my Waverly chalk paint in the plaster color, and I did just one full coat of that and then did some touch-ups in some areas that I didn't get completely covered. And I also did a dry brushing on this heart. It kind of reminds me of the wicker chairs that you used to see that were so popular. So maybe it's the same material that they used to make those. But I did just do a light dry brushing on the front and the back of that heart. And I also did some distressing with my antique wax with a small chip brush on all of those wood pieces as well. And I did the same thing on my heart. You guys know, if you've been with me since the beginning, how I like to distress things and make things look more vintage and rustic. Of course, if you don't like that style, you can skip this step. And once I had everything distressed to my liking, I started just playing around with the placement of this, trying to figure out how I was going to assemble everything and get this to look the way that I wanted it to. I am trying to create a topiary, so I was trying to just figure out the placement and everything like that, make sure this wouldn't be too top heavy, and I would be able to keep this standing upright. So once I had kind of a game plan, I just started assembling everything. I did trace around that wooden candle holder on that wooden circle, and I just attached that with some hot glue to that. That will be the base for this project. And of course you want to make sure that's as centered as you can get it, because you want your base to be stable before you start putting everything else together. And I just kind of measured where I thought I wanted my heart to go on that dowel rod and added some hot glue. This and the next step were the most challenging for me because there wasn't a lot of surface area on the back of that heart or the dowel rod either that met. So I did kind of just have to hold that in place to make sure that dowel rod was level until that glue had set up. And then I did go back and add some extra glue on either side and on top of that dowel rod just to make sure I had a good hold. In this part, you guys, you might want to either drill a hole in the bottom of that candle holder or maybe add some styrofoam. I just used hot glue and I filled this candle holder up pretty much all the way to the top with hot glue. And I did have to hold this probably for about 5 minutes until all that glue had set up so my dowel rod wouldn't fall over. That's why I suggest maybe drilling a hole or using some floral foam or something like that, just as some extra support for that dowel rod, and you probably wouldn't have to hold it as long. But once I had that set up and where I wanted it, and I knew it wasn't going to fall over on me, I added that other little finial on the top of my topiary just with some hot glue. And while all of that was setting up, I wanted to add kind of a messy fabric bow to this project. So I still had some of that scarf left over that I have used for my other two projects in this video. And I just cut out a small piece and I cut that into strips. These were probably about 1.5 inches in width. And then I just cut each of those strips in half. I really like the soft, fuzzy feel of this fabric, and I just think it adds just a soft touch to all of these Valentine projects that I have been creating. And I also pulled out kind of this blush color chiffon ribbon. I really like this color. It was just a kind of a soft pink accent to this project. Again, trying to keep everything neutral. So I just started layering my scarf pieces with my chiffon ribbon, and I just added this until I was happy with the fullness that I had in this bow. And I just used a rubber band to secure that in the middle. You could use some jute twine, pipe cleaners, whatever that you had on hand. I just had some of these rubber bands close by. So I just made sure to loop that until everything was secured tightly, and then I just took another one of those scarf strips and cut that in half. And I just wrapped that around that rubber band and just used some hot glue to secure that in place. And I added some hot glue underneath that bottom portion of my heart on the dowel rod and just added my little messy bow right there and held that in place until that glue had set up. And to cover up all of that glue that I had put in that candle holder, I just took some small pieces of my Spanish moss and glued that down with some hot glue. That just covered that up. And I love the way Spanish moss kind of softens a project as well. I like to use that a lot in my fall decor especially, and spring as well. So this will transition into my spring decor. And I just trimmed off any of those little excess pieces of that Spanish moss. And I wasn't too happy with the large gap that I had at the top of this topiary. I didn't really space that out the way that I should have. So I just pulled out one of these unfinished wood hearts, and yep, my paintbrush came apart there. The tip just fell right down into my paint bottle, and I just did one coat of that plaster colored paint from Waverly, and then just did that dry brushing again with the antique wax just to make sure that blended in with all of the other wood pieces on this project. And I just glued that right under that wood finial on the top, and that finishes this project. This one I actually have on my corner cabinet in my dining room, and I think it looks perfect there. You just have a lot of rustic vibes from this piece, but let me know what you guys think about this idea. I hope you guys love these neutral Valentine DIYs. I know I do, and I am so happy with how they turned out. Please give today's video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and click that hot button if you can find it. That really helps my channel to grow. I hope you all have a blessed day, and I will see you in the next one.